Hey everyone, today we are going to be covering how to create a assignment on Evallo, a digital assignment on Evallo, and the reason I'm saying digital assignment and not digital SAT is because even though the formatting the user interface is going to look very similar to the digital SAT, you can actually create any kind of assignment that you want to digitize with the method that we are going to be covering today, right? So uh, before we get started, just a quick overview of all the terminologies that we're going to be using. So assignment is the term that we're going to be using for any kind of test that can be assigned on Evallo. It could be a drill, it could be a full length test, it could even a PDF based test on Evallo is called an assignment. Prepwork is the tool that we have. Prepwork is essentially the brand through which we market this particular product. The different formats that we have available on the platform are DSAT, SAT. The SAT is the old SAT, the ACT, and then other format in case you have other tests, other types of tests that you would want to upload. Metadata refers to the data that is about that particular test. For example, the scoring scale, the amount of time that is required per section, the description that's going to go in, the different names of the different sections, all of that. So all the background information about that test is going to be called the metadata about the assignment. And let's see. For now, let's get started with creating our first test. So the way we're going to get started is you're going to go to prep work, and under prep work you're going to go to content, and this is all happening as an admin. So an admin is someone who has created an account on Evallo and has the administrative access to the organization. And so now once you go to content, here you can click on create, and once you click on create, it will ask you to select an assignment name, select a type. In case you're uploading a PDF based test, you can upload a PDF. In case you're uploading a digital test, the only thing that you would have to upload is the metadata. Now, how to create the metadata is really where the big challenge is really where the big task is, I would say. So let's actually start off with that. So here I have a full-length digital SAT that we have created on the platform as a reference, and this is where I have the template. So I'm gonna refer to we're gonna make changes in the template and see if it works, and then we're gonna look at the digital SAT that we have already uploaded to the platform as an example when we are finally uploading the test to the platform. So anyway, let's start off with some of these columns here. So first of all, within this file, you can see that there are a bunch of different tabs. The first tab is where we would store all of the metadata about the test, about the particular sections that are going to be part of that particular assignment. So that is why we name it as section metadata. Now, before we walk through all of these items, one thing that you need to keep in mind is that every single heading that you see here has to be exactly the way it is. Even a single space, additional space somewhere, either in these headers or in the naming of these tabs, it can cause problems, right? So there should be zero typos, because if there's even a small typo somewhere, it can actually end up causing the entire file to not work. So just be careful with all the headings that are being used within this file. So we'll start off with the first column here, which is ID. This refers to the section number, and the wording here. So here I'm using section 1, section 2, section 3, section 4, and so on. This has to match exactly the way it is written here, with the naming of the tabs that are going to be for each and every section. So for example, if I add a section 5 for this assignment, then I need to add a tab which is named section 5 exactly the way it is named here. Each section essentially refers to one particular segment of the test that the student has to take within a given time frame, without which they cannot jump onto the next section unless they have submitted one section. So, for example, on the digital SAT, we have four different sections: the reading and writing modules 1 and 2, and then the math module 1 and 2, right? This is the second column here is what will show up on the actual test. Like if you'd want to name a particular test, if you want to name a particular section something, this is where you'd add the corresponding name to that particular section. This is where you can add the timer. I think these timings are wrong. This is 32 and 35 minutes for the digital SAT. So we're just going to change that. So now this timer is in minutes, and the timer refers to the amount of time in minutes that will be given per section. Then we have the scoring scale. Scoring scale is quite interesting. We'll cover this when we cover the scoring tab right here. But the general idea is that every section can have its own scoring scale, and you can also combine different sections to refer to the same scoring scale in case you're adding them up. So, for example, on the SAT, the scores are additive in nature, right? So, for example, on the reading and writing modules, both module 1 and 2 together contribute to a score out of 800. But on the ACT, you do not combine different section scores, right? So, there on the ACT, you would require each of these sections to have a different scoring scale. So, you'd have scale 1, scale 2, scale 3, and scale 4 on the ACT. But for the SAT, because the two modules of the reading and writing are combined together, we are referring to both of them in scale one. And for math, module one and two, we are referring to them in scale two by combining them together. This particular column, question, this refers to the number of questions that would be there within a particular section. So as you can see within this DSAT 3 that we had created earlier, this is the number of questions. I'm just gonna copy this and paste that here to save some time. And then description is what will show up to the student before they start a particular section. So let's say that the student is in the screen, like they've just clicked on the start button and they are yet to start a particular section. Before they start any section, this is the description that they're going to see on their end. So here, for example, the description that we've added is the section test your essential skills in reading and writing skills through a series of questions. Each question includes one or more passages, etc., etc., etc. This is very similar to the College Board language. I think it's exactly the language. I'm not sure, but yeah. So this is where you can add the descriptions for um, each of these sections. Sometimes, if you're creating your own drills, you might want to give specific instructions to students about those sections, like do this, do that, etc., whatever, right? So you can give section-wise description and instructions within this particular column. Next, the other four columns that you see here, calculator, annotation, review, and cross options, these are the different tools that we have on the platform, whether you want to enable these tools for this section or not. So for example, for section one, read and writing module, I probably don't want the student to have a calculator because that's really not necessary, but I do want the student to have an annotation tool. I want them to be able to review their questions. So the mark for review button, you can enable or disable this by saying yes or no here. And the cross option, this essentially refers to the ability for the students to cross off the answer choices when they're attempting these questions. You can enable or disable that as well. So for now, I'm just gonna uh, do this for reading writing, and then I'm gonna say yes to everything um, for the math modules. All right, so this is the first tab of the metadata sheet. Next, let's go to the scoring. Now, scoring is a bit more complicated. So for this, we're going to use the reference of this digital SAT that we have already created. Um, Very honestly, we do not have a lot of data about how College Board is addressing scoring with the SAT. So we had to come up with our own systems. We did a lot of research on how scoring is being handled by various tests, practices that the College Board had released when the digital SAT had first come out. We also read a lot of resources that the College Board had provided for educators, specifically for content writers, but there wasn't a lot of mention about how the scoring scale is decided. Plus, even if we knew everything, the big factor that determines a good scoring scale is having millions of students actually attempt, practice questions, understand the various difficulty levels, and then creating a scoring scale based on how each student is performing, normalizing the curves, and finally coming up with a scale um, that is actually fitting for that particular test. We do not have all of that data when we're creating a new test, and it's even if we were to use everything, we would still be guessing. So we wanted to come up with a system that is intuitive enough, that does some sort of an approximation of the score, but is obviously not the most accurate measurement of where a student is currently standing, right? So this is very subjective in nature. And when you are creating your own tests, this will again depend very heavily on what your perception of the test is, based on the content that you're creating, that you've created, and that you're trying to upload. If you're thinking that the content that you've uploaded is quite easy, you might make some adjustments to the scale to make it a little bit more difficult to get to a perfect score or get to a high score and so on. Um, so we tried to divide these into different phases when we were coming up with the scoring scale, and we tried to match it very closely to the practice SATs, practice DSATs that the College Board had released, which is why this digital SAT will look quite similar to that in nature. But anyway, the way this works is the first column right here where it says correct Q, this refers to how many questions the student actually gets correct within that particular scale. Now you'll see that this goes all the way to 54. That's because the highest number of questions that we have in one particular scale is 27 plus 27. So this goes all the way to 54. And the reason why it's 27 plus 27 is because both of these sections are referring to scale 1. If I had an ACT here instead, where I would have scale 1, scale 2, scale 3, scale 4, and I would have, I think if I remember correctly, 75 questions on the grammar and 40 questions each for reading and science sections, and 60 questions for math, then in that case, for the ACD, this scale would go all the way till 75, because that's the highest number of questions that's there in one particular section. So anyway, the reason why this is 54 is because we're combining those two sections. And now scale 1, this refers to the reading writing scores. And based on how we have structured this DSAT 3, we came up with a scoring scale that, if a student is overall able to get, let's say, 37 questions correct out of 54 on the reading and writing modules. And again, these tests are not adaptive. So we have to take into account the overall score of both the sections combined for this to work. And we do not have individual section wise scores either, because that would be a little incorrect. That's how the old SAT used to work, where give like out of 400 each. So with the new SAT, the essentially the way this system works is, if the student has, let's say, 37 questions correct out of 54, then the corresponding score, the scaled score, is going to be 590 out of 800. The maximum score is 800 if they get all 54 questions correct, and so on, right? So this is a reference that could be used for the scoring scale. Similarly, for the math module, there are a total of 44 questions, 22 in each section. And again, you can see that if the student is getting, let's say, 40 questions correct out of 44, then they get a score of 740, and so on, right? Um, so this is how scoring works. Again, if you want to have discrete scoring scales, like for example, we created these drills on the platform where, for Algebra 2, we had 6 or 7 different sections, and each section had its own raw scale out of 15 questions. And we wanted to give each question an equal weightage of 10 points. So for those drills, we could simply add 10, 20, 30, 40, all the way up until 150 for 15 questions. So you could decide how you'd want to play around with the scoring scales. um, but the idea, as long as you get the idea that you can combine a bunch of different scales together uh, for different sections, or you could have individual scoring for each section. That is really the main crux here for this particular tab. Now, coming to the most important tabs, where you'd actually add the content for each section. And keep in mind that this is not all of the content, because some questions would require you to add passages, some questions would require you to add images, either in the question itself, or maybe some of the answer choices will have some images, like some graphs and charts and so on. So even after you upload all of this content to the platform, you'd still need to edit certain questions where you'd want to upload additional media to those questions, right? So we'll start off with section 1, which is the reading and writing module 1. And again, reminder that notice how this is named as section 1, which is matching this exactly the way it is. So anyway, the first column here is question number. again, note that there is no space in between and there is no space after either. um, this simply refers the question number of yeah, like this just refers the question number. Then the correct answer. So if the question is an MCQ question, then you can refer to the variable that you want to add here. Um, this is not limited to A, B, C, or D. This could very well be any other letters as well. Like, for example, the ACT uses F, G, H, J for some answer choices and A, B, C, D for certain others. So the ACT, like if we were creating an ACT instead, we would simply rename these as option B, option F, option G, and so on. But because we're dealing with the SAT right now, these are named as option A, option B, option C, and option D, and these correspond to the types of correct answers that are there. If a question is not an MCQ question and instead it's a grid-in question, then in that case you can just simply type whatever the correct answer is. The system is hard coded to match the correct answer with the student's response. As long as it matches exactly the way it is, it will show it as correct. In case you have a range of different answers, there is a way to do that as well. I guess within this particular sheet we don't have any range of correct answers, but let's see if in the template we have something. I guess we don't. So this is something that I'll share separately. But essentially, for a range of answer choices, like if you have, let's say, three correct answer choices to a question, you simply add a curly bracket, and curvy or curly. Yeah. But anyway, let's say that three is one of the answers, and five is another answer, and 19 is another answer, right? Or maybe negative 19 is another answer. So I would simply add these three, and then I would close the curly bracket, and that's it, right? If there's a range of answers, I would simply add a curly bracket. Let's say any answer between 3 to 5 is allowed. So I would say 3:5, and that's it. So that means anything between 3 and 5 would be fine, and so on. So this is how range of answers can be added. Coming to the next column, which is concepts, this refers to, so now we are essentially categorizing each question. We use generic terms for concepts and strategies. The SAT uses skills and domains, which, when we revamp the entire platform, we're gonna like add more variety to these headings. But as of now, the common heading that we used across all the different types of tests is concepts and strategies. Concept is a larger bracket, strategies is a sub bracket within it. So let's say that for example, here manipulating equations is a concept under which factoring polynomials is a category, right? Or angles and triangles is a concept under which parallel line and triangle properties is a strategy that is associated with it, and so on, right? It's essentially category one, category two. Don't go by concepts or strategy, like don't go by those names. Then we have question type, which again refers to whether it's an MCQ question type or a grid-in. Again, keep in mind that no typos. You need to make sure that it's written just exactly the way it is. Um, by the way, you can add as many concepts as you would want. These will also show up in the student's profile within those charts. So if I have manipulating equations for A, and let's say I have, do I have another manipulating equation? I have manipulating equations for this question as well, for 16, and for question number one, or 15 and question number one. So if the wording matches exactly the way it is, then on the student's profile within the charts, the analytics charts, the system will recognize that, okay, this is one common concept. And then let's say that we are looking at percentage accuracy. So let's that's out of these three questions that are manipulating equations, the student misses out on two. Then the system will detect that, okay, there's a 66% accuracy for the student within manipulating equations, and so on. But if there's a typo, like if this is like manipulating equation, for example, then the system will think that this is a different concept and this is a different concept. So then it will end up giving the student 50% accuracy on manipulating equations for missing out on one question there, and 100% accuracy for the third question, which they might have gotten correct, and so on. So just make sure that again, when you're creating these concepts and strategies, they are matching word to word. Even like sensitive, like these are case sensitive as well. So just make sure that everything is matching perfectly with the other items. Um, Okay, then passage. This is a fairly straightforward column. if you have a passage associated with a particular question, you can enable or disable this. If by mistake you add a no to a question, that's fine. You can, this is something that you can control in the UI of the platform later on. You can toggle this on or off in the platform itself. So we'll cover this in a separate video. But certain things you cannot control in the platform. Like for example, you cannot move around question numbers. If you have added 27 questions to a particular section, you cannot add a 28th question, for example. Apart from that, you cannot rename a section. You cannot change the timer. Like most of this information in the section editor cannot be edited on the platform, but you can edit the content, and you can edit the question type and so on directly on the platform. So when we cover that, we'll cover that as well. Question image, if in case you have an image associated with the question, you can add that. In case you have an image associated with the answers, you can mention a yes here for that. So like for example, some math questions would have an image in the question, like some graph or chart, and some of these might have an image in the answers as well. Then finally, question text. This is where the primary question goes. So again, taking the SAT as an example, sometimes you would have like the standard English convention questions, for example. You would have which choice completes the text so that it conforms to this convention. Like this is the primary question. The paragraph for this, the passage for this would be added separately within the platform itself, and because it would require formatting, so it's something that happens directly on the platform. And the answers for it are added right here. For each answer choice, you would have, like for each option, you can add a particular answer choice right here, and so on, right? So for example, for this question, maybe there's a paragraph that we have provided to the student, and that is added separately on the platform, and these are the four answer choices that we're providing to them: it's, there, his, etc. Right, so this is how it is structured. Similarly for math, for example, let's say that I have a split screen where, like, we'll look at this one where we have a passage enabled for a math question, right? So the reason why we have a passage enabled here, I'm assuming it's an angles and triangles question, so there would probably be an image or some sort of a reference associated in this question, which is why we have that passage enabled. And if you do not have the passage enabled, by the way, then the split screen does not happen. Like the screen, like the questions can be in the center of the screen. If you enable the passage, then the screen is split into two, where on the left side you would have the passage and you would have the images, etc., all of that, and on the right you would have the primary question text along with the answer choices. So yeah, that is pretty much it. Now there is a lot more to cover in terms of latex and in terms of how the test would look when we upload this on the platform. So let's jump on to first what it would look like after we have added all of this information, right? So I'm gonna upload the DSAT 3 right here to the platform because this is already created. So I'm gonna go to the platform. I'm gonna upload the metadata right here, and DSAT 3. Let's include this. And I'm going to name this sample DSAT. You can name it whatever you'd want. As long as the name does not match exactly what we have on the platform, there should be no conflicts. And now let's click on create. So now it says test metadata uploaded, which means the file was added successfully. In case you receive an error, um, that means something is wrong about that file. Now, we can see that the sample DSAT 3 is added as an assignment. I'm going to click on view. And here, surely I have all the four sections. I have the timer added right here, along with the number of questions. Notice I was saying that there's no way to add another questions. Like if I've added 22 questions, the metadata, I'm only going to see 22 questions here.